taxation. When I talk to small business owners in Montgomery County, the one thing I hear overwhelmingly is that they believe that they've become de facto tax collectors for the county. They're overtaxed and in some cases making less off of their business than county, state, federal government. So how can we address, and we do have a problem of businesses not staying and failing. So do you have a specific remedy for this particular problem? I'll give each of you 3 minutes to address it, and then if you want a minute to rebut anyone or speak against whatever anyone said, I'll give you that. I know how people don't like the term rebuttal, but it is a debate, I hope. We'll start, we started with Mark, we'll start down here at this end. Bill, what would you do to remedy this situation?
Well, it really starts with attitude. I think that our small business community has felt for years like they're viewed with suspicion and with contempt. And we don't need to do it that way. Our small businesses cherish their employees. They are in business to make a profit, but they're also in business to provide service to the community and service to the employees. So I think we need to send that message. I think they need to feel like the business community are our constituents just like our everyday constituents are. And too often I don't think we're sending that message.
How do you send that message?
Well, it's a lot of things. I mean, sometimes it's regulatory issues where we need to make sure that we're trying to facilitate good things and not just focused on throwing up barriers. I think there's a sense, for example, if you look at the liquor control issue, our small business, our restaurants are classic small businesses, and they complain for year in and year out that the Department of Liquor Control was broken and not working. And our council, for the most part, said we're not willing to fix it. They said we were not willing to even have a referendum to get us out of this business because the revenue was more important to them. And so that kind of goes to your point, to them not feeling like they are part of the community that should have service. I mean, we were, when the issue of trying to get out of the alcohol business came up, there was a council work session where one of the members called the restaurants greedy for trying to have service that actually delivered their product on time. So I think it starts with an attitude, but we really need to be in the business of facilitating for success.
So you're talking about reducing taxes to small businesses?
Well, I don't think in Montgomery County people resent paying taxes, right? If that tax revenue is going towards things that are needed, if it's going towards those common goods, if our quality of life is going up as a result. I think there's a real sense from a lot of us that those of us in the middle class, a lot of us feel like our taxes have gone up and our services and our quality of life have not gotten a lot better. And I have to question whether we need to be spending some of the things, we spend money on a lot of things that are just unrelated to the quality of life of our everyday citizens. I think there's plenty of ways we can reduce the breadth of some of the things we do. We can focus more on the core functions of local government.
Thank you. George, I'll let you go next.
Recently I went to visit my very good friend Marc Mayorga, who runs a manufacturing business here in Rockville, Mayorga Organics. It's a coffee roaster. He employs 40 people in a thriving manufacturing business right here in Montgomery County. And Martin's endorsing my campaign for county executive. I asked him, what could county government do to be of help? And he said, you know, you're the first elected official who ever came to visit me and asked me that question. I do think that a lot of what we need to do with our business community is in hands-on relationship building. We need to make sure that elected officials are responsive. I have the best reputation of any council member for answering my email. I have hundreds of messages in my archive from constituents who say, you know, I wrote to everyone, you're the only one who got back to me. We also have to understand that the immigrant community is primarily the source of most of our startup businesses today. We need to be comfortable and familiar with our immigrant communities, and we need to spend more time getting to know them and understanding what's on their mind. We also need to do...
So George, I hate to interrupt you, but I will do this. If I'm going to hold you to this question, what specifically do you think can be done to reduce the pressure on small business?
I think every business's issue is case specific. I think that government needs to be responsive. We need to provide government that works. We did appoint, and I give Roger Berliner credit for his initiative. We have a small business navigator. She has an excellent reputation, Judy Stevenson. I'd like to see us expand. We've established a small business resource center in the executive branch. But the main thing is government that works. We need to remind our entire workforce that it's a privilege to be in public service, that we work for the taxpayers. If a taxpayer encounters Montgomery County government, it should be a pleasure. Every taxpayer should get a prompt response, a satisfactory effort to solve their problem and address their issue. Each small business will have a different issue, but government needs to be quick step. Government needs to understand who we work for. As far as taxes are concerned, I've never heard anyone complain that their taxes are too low, but I've heard everyone ask for more service, better schools, more police protection, and so that's the challenge we face as elected officials. We have to balance the need for excellent services, which maintain a high quality of life here, with the strong concern over the tax rate, which is real. We need to address both of those issues.
Thank you. And so, Roger, remedies for the small businesses. Do you have a specific remedy that you think would work?
Well, first let me share what I have done, because I believe that I've been the strongest advocate for small businesses on our council for ages now. And I have the support of small business leaders like Andy Stern, who was the former head of the Chamber of Commerce of the Bethesda Chamber. I have the support of business leaders because I did listen to business leaders, because I did create the Small Business Navigator, because I did lead the way to create the Business Solutions Group, because it is hard to do business in Montgomery County. The regulatory tapes that people have to go through are unbelievable. And so what I tried to create was a context in which county government would be there to help businesses, not hinder them. The larger question in my
regulations?
The larger question in my view is not taxes, but it is the regulatory. It is our quote progressive agenda, and whether or not we meld our progressive agenda with the needs of our small business community. That's what I've sought to do on issues as important as minimum wage. I do not disagree that we need to raise the minimum wage, but we need to do it in a way that accommodates the very real concerns of the small business community. And small business is big business in Montgomery County. So if we don't take care of small businesses when we do work like that, then the rest doesn't really matter. When we had Sick and Safe Leave before us, I urged my colleagues to take the approach that Seattle had taken. And I was told, actually, Roger, the advocates for this legislation want the strongest bill possible so that we can take that to Annapolis. And I said, actually, the advocates can't be the people that decide this. We have to decide this for what's good for Montgomery County. And so I lost on those kinds of amendments. But that's how I've sought to do my work, to advance a progressive agenda that actually works for everyone, including our small business community.
Thank you very much, Roger. And Mark, you get the
Sure.
2 minutes.
I've had experience with the regulatory issues because I've worked with a number of businesses to reverse decisions that were made by our own departments regarding their operations. I had a business in Wheaton where they were told they were going to have to cut a wall, hole in the wall behind the counter and put a new door in.
No, we're not talking about the wall. That's the president.
Different wall. I wasn't done with that one. And basically, they were totally ignored that they should have been grandfathered into the process. And the guy was ready to spend $40,000 or $50,000 doing something he never should have had to do. And if I hadn't gotten involved in it, that would have continued to happen. I've been involved in Silver Spring with the businesses who've lost access to deliveries because of the development the county is partnering behind those businesses. They lost their alley access and they asked for help, and I've been involved in helping them move forward. I'm the council member who got the fire inspections out of the building inspection process because I found out that the building code, fire code were one and the same, and yet we were sending out fire inspectors after we sent out building inspectors, paying a separate fee, more delay, and then people being dinged for things that were in their plans and being told that wasn't successful, even though it had a fire stamp on it. And I intervened, and the executive went ahead, pulled the inspectors out of the new building process, and now has pulled the inspectors out of the other process. I think regulation can be a problem. The problem is getting the business community to get specific. And I've had this conversation with the chamber for more than 5 years now, because I will agree there are regulations that should be changed. I have great concern about what we make people do when a business turns over. But if you don't come through the door and sit down like the people who approached me on the fire issue, I cannot do anything. I did not subscribe to the view that all regulations are bad. I think you have to look at what the regulations are asking people to do. And I, as a councilman, are willing to look at that. And I'll just say lastly that Mr. Katz and I are going to introduce a resolution calling for a study of the fees and the regulations that affect small businesses and affect the opening of small businesses. Because if there's ever a place for reform, it's probably in here. And I think we can do a better job on this.
Thank you very much. Now this
So Marc,
question.
can I just chip in?
Yeah, you got a minute.
The gentlemen on this dais are friends and colleagues and people that I respect, but I also think there's something that's just incongruous, which is there's 40 years of combined experience in county government between these three leaders. If it's awfully hard to imagine that these are the people that are going to solve the situation when they've been there for more than a decade. I mean, you think you see a tremendous amount of frustration among the voters, among the people in Montgomery County, that nothing's changing, talk is cheap, and that is why we had a pretty extraordinary episode where 70% of our voters came in and imposed term limits, because they are ready for new leaders to come in that will actually make the tough decisions to change the course of this county.
Anybody want to rebut that? You got a minute if you do. It's all up to you.
I'll only make one observation. I think talk is cheap from somebody who hasn't done this work.
Anybody else?
I would venture to say that I bet if term limits were put at the state level, that you guys would be gone in 12 years too. There's a general disconcert.
Now Robin is sitting here. You know you just gave him an idea.
I don't believe in term limits, because I think the best term limit is to vote. And if people are unhappy with people, they should go. I mean, I've only been the top vote getter in the last 2 elections. I don't think it shows signs that I've greatly displeased people, but if you knew anything about functioning of county government, we are a legislative body. We are not the executive body. We do not appoint the department heads. We do not control how things operate. And this is probably why we're all running for executive. I think, and I know I feel, that I would put a different hand on the helm. I would look at things from a different perspective. And I really believe that we have the opportunity to make change. I don't think that the way we're doing things right now is sustainable, and I think people are owed a better deal.
George, you got a minute if you want.
I'm very proud of the 15 years that I've spent here at this dais. I've helped a large number of people, and if you give me the opportunity to lead this government, I can help even more. I want to make sure that we look after people with disabilities. I want to make sure we look after people who don't have health insurance. I want to make sure that we close the achievement gap and provide educational opportunity for every student, regardless of where they live. I want to work with the school system to expand choice, to make it easier for people to get the best curriculum. We should not be rationing the best curriculum based on where someone lives. So I'm very proud of my record of public service. I'm very proud to have been elected twice by my colleagues as council president, and I hope to be able to continue my public service and help even more people.
Thanks. I'm going to, Paul, you got one for me?
Yeah, in line with the small business topic, I want to ask you about the minimum wage, specifically Bill 2817. Now, Mark, you introduced it calling for increasing the minimum wage from $11.50 per hour to $15 per hour by 2020. Ike Leggett previously vetoed similar attempts to increase the minimum wage by 2020. The committee voted to extend the time to 2022 for businesses over 50 employees and 2024 for businesses with 50 or under employees. Roger, you voted for the changes. George, you voted against them, if I'm correct. I'm really concerned about the minimum wage because an individual, a head of household of 4, working a 40-hour work week should not fall below the poverty line. So my question is, what is your position, each of you, on the minimum wage, and why did some support it going to 2020 and others to extend it to 2022 and 2024?
And we're going to start this time with George. You get first shot at it.
Well, we've heard Mr. Berliner say that on each occasion there has been before the county council a bill to protect workers. He's tried to weaken it, and he did that most recently in the Health and Human Services Committee, which I chair. I was in the minority on that vote. As we said, small business is a very, very important part of our economy. In fact, 96% of businesses in Montgomery County have 50 employees or less. Under Mr. Berliner's amendment, those 96% of businesses would not get a minimum wage increase for their workers until 2024. We don't know precisely what effect a minimum wage increase will have in the future. What we know is that we have increased the minimum wage 3 times in a row, and unemployment has gone down substantially in Montgomery County each year. It has not gone up. I have great confidence in the future of this diverse economy. We need to do more to diversify away from federal spending. We need to promote private investment and promote jobs. But my support for the minimum wage is confident that our economy will grow, that we will thrive, and that when you build more middle-class family incomes, that helps small businesses because the wage increase goes directly into consumer spending and it has a multiplier effect that benefits the entire economy, especially the retail economy.
Thank you, Roger.
So the county executive, as you know, proposed the dates 22 and 24, and he has said, this is the legislation I will sign. I don't think many people accuse the county executive of being heartless or lacking compassion. The reality is, you're right, Paul, people work too hard for too little in our county. And the reality also is, we've heard from so many small businesses, including those owned by immigrant communities, that if you do this at that pace, we will go out of business. We will reduce the hours that people spend. We will reduce their benefits. There will be consequences. And so my goal as a legislature is to harmonize these two competing truths. And I believe the county executive has put us in a path that achieves that, which does raise the minimum wage every year up to $15 an hour, but by 24 for small businesses and by 22 for larger businesses. If right now there are 4 of us that support the county executive's position, that means in the absence of coming to some understanding here, then we will repeat it, be like Groundhog Day, where we'll pass something and it'll get vetoed, and then we'll be back to where we were. The county executive has said, this is what I will sign. So I am supporting the county executive's position on this. I think it's a reasonable position that reconciles the competing truths at play here.
Mark?
I think the problem is that I don't consider these competing truths. There are a wealth of studies that have been done by reputable economists, not the bogus study that was done from Montgomery County. Nobody ever asked a group of businessmen, what will you do if I raise the wage? And by the way, your answers will determine what policy I adopt. That's like asking your kids how they feel about cleaning up after dinner, and that'll affect the policy I adopt toward you.
Your kids never volunteered for that?
No. So the study that was done was not legitimate. The studies that have legitimately done, following methodologies that everybody understands, cluster around the conclusion that there was little or no job loss from raising the minimum wage, even for small businesses. Montgomery County just raised the wage greater than what we're proposing right now, and you don't find that job loss, but the arguments that are presented today are the exact same arguments that were presented 4 years ago when we raised the wage. It didn't happen then, yet if we had listened to those arguments and let a survey determine what we were going to do, we would have said no 4 years ago. We would have said, oh my God, the business community said we're going to shut everything down. I don't buy it. I think they're vested in staying in business. They need to stay in business. They're obviously in business because they've chosen that path rather than other things. I do expect there to be adjustments. People will have to make adjustments. But we don't seem to have any problem asking poor people to make adjustments.
Are you are for extending it in order for getting the county executive to sign it?
Look, I would rather not do that. And to counter Mr. Berliner's point, there are 4, which last time I checked was a minority. And the counting on the executive to veto a bill that the majority supports is hardly, in my mind, the best way to reach a compromise. So I'm going to.
What's the best way?
The best way is to have a conversation about what makes sense and what doesn't. The idea of extending, for example, the 2022 for large businesses, hello folks, Target is going to $15 in 2020. There's no justification for changing the 2020 year. We can have a discussion about what's the best year. We can have a discussion about the other things the county can do. That's why Sydney and I are looking at other process issues. But we need a better way to go forward than this, and certainly not dictated by the minority.
Bill?
Paul, I think you really put your finger on one important piece, which is nobody working full-time should be living in poverty. That is something I think all of us are committed to and all of us believe. I'm proud to have supported minimum wage increase in Annapolis. The last time we increased our minimum wage, we've already begun conversations about whether that's still the appropriate number, whether we want to increase that. Since the 2014 increase hasn't been fully phased in yet, I think some folks felt it was premature, but I know that that day's coming up soon. Let me take a slightly different take, which is, I think there are real benefits from this being a policy that we pursue and enact at the state level, because that's actually where it's enforced, right? The state is the level of government that has the Department of Labor. And the State Department of Labor actually currently has to enforce the Montgomery County minimum wage. We passed a law to require them to do that in 2014. The county isn't really set up to do that sort of employment regulatory function, and we have certainly heard that as the counties and the state get into deeper and deeper employment regulation, you can have real problems with consistency of definitions and applications.
So are you supporting it or not?
Well, I think it's a policy that we really ought to be pursuing at the state level. And even if you pursue a state level, you can have a higher minimum wage in some parts of the state than others. But I think it would make a lot of sense for that to be a state bill rather than a local bill.
All right, I'm going to ask one question of each of you. It shouldn't take you too long. Have any of you, I'll start with Mark, any of you ever worked for the minimum wage?
Absolutely. Look, when I forgot my first jobs, I think it was making 95 cents an hour. I remember going to university.
Overpaid.
Yes, obviously. I remember going to the University of Maryland and working 28 hours, grossing $32, and being, by the way, able to share a house with a couple other guys. Everybody got their own bedroom. Nobody was double bunking. We bought food. We bought beer. We bought our class books. We paid our tuition. We did things on a minimum wage when I was growing up, working part-time, that people cannot do today. And that's one of the things that drives this for me, is the knowledge that things have changed so radically that the ability of people to live on minimum wage has been severely eroded. And who do you thank for that? The business community. If these folks had not done everything possible they could do to get the federal government to decouple minimum wage from inflation and to stop allowing it to rise gradually, we would already be at the point we should be at. We wouldn't be having this debate today. And sometimes things come back to haunt you. Now they say, well, we got away with many, many years not adjusting the minimum wage, and we know what the social consequences are, but God forbid you should make me raise it too much now. And I find that a really unfair argument. People have had to deal with poverty. I taught in a school, and I got to say, I saw kids come to school hungry every day. I saw kids who hadn't eaten since their Friday meal when they walked into school Monday
You're
morning.
going to solve that by working for minimum wage?
Well, $15, so let's put it this way, $15 puts in a couple's pocket $14,000 more a year than the current $11.50. If you don't think that poor people wouldn't do something meaningful for 14 grand a year, that this isn't food on the table, clothes on the backs of their children, the ability to live in better housing, not live overcrowded as many people do today, you're wrong. I believe this is one of the most fundamental things you can do to alter people's trajectories in life, and we ought to do it.
Gary Cohn said that you could actually.
Hold on. I want to get Roger first. I got to get back to you, Paul. Roger,
So I was a waiter. I was a waiter.
you work for below minimum wage.
I worked for below minimum wage,
But tips.
I did well with my tips. Let me turn it slightly on the other side of the coin. I'm the only person up here who actually bought a small business, built a small business, and ran a small business. I did that for 18
You're
years.
shaking your head.
I did that for 18 years. And I got to tell you, I woke up every day trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to grow my bottom line? How am I going to take care of my people? How am I going to market myself? How am I going to market my company? And it was every day you worked hard at it. So I know in my DNA what it's like as a small businessman to struggle every day. And so I think you have to have that consciousness plus government experience if you're going to look through the lens that is appropriate for issues like this. You have to have experience in both. I don't doubt for a moment people work too hard for too little, and that it is not okay for people to work 40, 50, 60 hours and be in poverty. I would say to you, if you want to change the trajectory of people's lives, you really want to focus more on workforce development and workforce training, because then you can get people jobs with $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. And that's been my focus, because I think...
What do they do in the meantime?
Well, okay, that's why we're having this conversation. I agree we should raise the minimum wage. But I think if you focus on that exclusively, as opposed to really focusing on how you can change people's lives, that's a mistake. So I believe you do increase the minimum wage. You do it on a path that is appropriate for our county, not for New York City, not for other large metropolitan areas. You do it that's right for Montgomery County and for our people. And you do these other things that really can make such a huge difference in how people live their lives.
Thank you very much. George, have you ever worked for minimum wage?
Yes, I have. The first job I ever had was in high school. I cut grass for minimum wage. In college, I did piecework as a freelance writer, and it wasn't based on hours. And then
Did you work for us?
I was in the Bay Area. I attended UC Berkeley, and I worked freelance for the student newspaper and for a couple of newspapers in San Francisco. And then after I got out of college, I worked for less than minimum wage. I was a campaign manager for a state senate campaign, making $1,000 a month and working night and day, 7 days a week. So my wife runs a small business in our home. We set up the business together. It's her business, but we're married taxpayers filing jointly, so I understand the struggle that she faces trying to make sure that she can meet payroll every month. She runs a child care center, early childhood education center in our home, and her lowest paid employee makes $14 an hour, and my wife is a strong proponent of a healthy wage because she believes that it enables her to retain the best employees, and her turnover is very low. It would have been great if when we had passed the minimum wage a few years ago, we had indexed it to inflation, and perhaps we wouldn't have this divisive debate now, but an amendment offered by Mr. Berliner removed indexing from that bill, and so now we're back here talking about it again, trying to figure out what could the business community live with. Unfortunately, we haven't had a real dialogue with the business community about what schedule and what rate would be appropriate to raise the minimum wage, and so we're sort of throwing numbers out there. The county executive insisted that he couldn't support anything without a study. We commissioned a study. Well, the county council voted 5-4 not to commission a study because we didn't think it would be useful. Mr. Leggett, on his own authority, commissioned one. It wasn't useful. The authors of the study can't defend it in public, and at my insistence, the county is not paying for the study because it was so useless. Mr. Leggett came out with his own proposal, which Mr. Berliner offered in my committee, which would delay the overwhelming majority of businesses. 96% of businesses would not have to pay their workers $15 until 7 years in the future under Mr. Berliner's amendment.
Thank you. And Bill, have you ever worked for minimum wage?
Oh, I worked as cutting grass, and I worked as a janitor at a summer camp, but I think it would be profoundly disrespectful to the men and women that have to work full-time for minimum wages for me to pretend that I lived that life, because I did. I always was able to go home to a cupboard that was already full and parents that were taken care of. So I was profoundly fortunate, and I don't want to insult the struggle those folks have by pretending that that's the struggle I had. But just hearing some of the other answers, it takes me back to the first set of questions we had, which were the reputation of this county as being hostile to business, and I heard some answers that just felt like this is a problem being laid at the feet of the business community. And when I talk to them about this issue, I don't get the sense they're I never get the sense anyone is anti-worker. On the contrary, oftentimes they're trying to figure out how they can give people shifts and still be competitive and still pay rent. I mean, it is expensive to rent a restaurant space in this county. They have to pay taxes, they have to pay WSSC for their water. These are folks that want to be treated, which I think they are, hardworking business owners that are trying to succeed, and if they don't succeed, the workers don't succeed either.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk